which is like, because the yeah, would have been a big problem. Hello there. I'm Claudia, by the way. Nice to meet you all. With my great pleasure, I will introduce Bruno Faidutti with this talk about board games to video game to board game. Please give a big round of applause.
Okay, so hello everybody. I'm not really used to speaking in English, but I will try. I'll do my best, at least not to such a crowd. And I start with a fun thing. Okay, yeah, it's better. Because it's in relation with something that will happen later today. I've just been asked how my name is supposed to be spoken, and it's a question I hate, because I think, in a way, asking this question is supposing that I'm stupid enough to care. And it's important for me that this kind of thing absolutely doesn't care. Well, and that, okay, I have an Italian name, my grandfather or great-grandfather, I'm not sure, was Italian. I don't care, it doesn't make me Italian in the least. And, okay, that's it. It's just because, and it's fun because I'm always asked this question when I'm working with American people. And French never ask, they don't care. And Europeans, as a rule, and Japanese, I work a lot with Japanese, they don't care. They just say it as it goes. And sometimes it's fun, and sometimes not, and that's all. Okay, but back to board games and video games. I think there are three, I will try, if I have enough time, because I also want to save time for questions. To discuss how board games are are made into video games, and the reverse, and why it's completely different. I start, yeah, here you have a picture of a Ticket to Ride app on the iPad. I think it comes from mine. And when you play Ticket to Ride, when you play chess, when you play backgammon, when you play Pandemic, on a computer, on a phone, or on anything. What's this?
For change your slide.
Ah, okay. Forward, backward. Okay, thanks. When you play Ticket to Ride on the computer, you play exactly the same game you play with friends, a cardboard game. It's exactly the same. The only difference is that you can play against the computer. At Ticket to Ride, the computer is very bad. At chess, the computer is much better, usually. But you play with exactly the same rules. And even when you look at it, it's made to look exactly the same. You even have the cards with, you see, with the round corners. So it's not really an adaptation, it's just an implementation. And almost every time video games made from board games are very true implementation of the board game. The only thing which is a bit different, of course, is the graphic presentation. The cards are not on the same place, etc., etc. but cards are made to look like cards. When there are dice, they are made to look like dice, etc., etc. And this has, I think, a fun effect, which is that now there are even video games which are almost implementation of card games which don't exist as card games. When you play Hearthstone, it's almost this, not exactly, but I say 90% of it is something which could have been a card game. And I've been told, I don't know, because I make another side note. I don't play much video games. And it's strange because when there is discussion about if designing video games and board games is the same thing, the same job, made by the same kind of people, I'm always with those who say that it's exactly the same, it's the same. It's not very different kinds of games. But actually, I'm not good at video games and I'm not very excited by them usually, with a few exceptions. So, but I've been told by friends who are on both sides, there are many now, that many computer games were originally play-tested in their very, very first form, or the very basic principles, as cardboard. Even when after with the computer, you can add lots of things that you cannot do with cardboard. And the result is that actually there are two kinds of board games. There are board games which can be implemented as a computer game, because all there is a map, cards, dice, things which can be represented on the screen, and also because nothing happens out of the screen, out of the components, and especially nothing between the players. And there are games that simply cannot be implemented in video games. Jenga. I can't imagine how you can make a Jenga simulation on a computer. Or you can make something, but it won't play exactly like you play actual Jenga. And when you play Ticket to Ride, it plays exactly like you play when you play Ticket to Ride. And also the game which include lots of psychological elements. And actually, it's interesting that most of my own design, I think maybe one or two, but almost none have been implemented as video games. And one of the reasons is probably that I deliberately try to make games with elements with things that you cannot really do with a computer, or which you have to do very differently. And especially with, psychological elements and, and this tension and trying to outguess your opponents. So, and it's much better to do it with, looking them in the eyes, etc., etc. And, my citadels, masquerade, diamant, there are talks now about making a computer version of diamant. I don't know if it will work, but I know it won't feel exactly as a board game. Why? Ticket to Ride, it does. So I know computers are good at many things. They will get better. They are every day good at more and more things. But I always try to focus at the things they are bad at so far. I thought about psychological elements. Yes, you can play poker with a computer, but it's not the same. And even playing poker with someone else through a computer is not the same experience as playing it face-to-face. Playing Ticket to Ride is almost the same experience. So when board games go into computer games, usually it's the same. There are a few exceptions. And I think, this was my Hearthstone to say that, it's just cards. And actually, it's just cards. And these are my games. Oh, if forgot that I had so many slides. Okay, these are my games, which I had to. I don't really imagine how they will feel as computer games, this one, as video games. I don't know. Diamant, they are working on it. The other ones, I don't think they ever tried. And I can't really imagine how it should work, how it can even be fun. And I think that's the problem. But now here I have Civilization, because I think Civilization is a fun example of a board game which was made into a video game which was very different, which added a lot of stuff, but which really started from the board game. And then the video game was made into a board game, which removed stuff from the video game, but not exactly the stuff which had been added. And as a result, you have two board games which are completely different, in fact, because you start. But I think this was possible. I think what happened, from the original Civilization to the original video game, it's something unusual. It's that it's a video game which tried to add a lot of stuff. And what happened after, when it went from the video game to the board game, is something more usual, which is that when video games are changed into board game, it's not implementation. It's more adaptation or even kind of a metaphor of the video game. Because, I'd say with board games, there are the board games which are adapted in the video game because it's possible to make the same thing with a computer. And the board games with which we don't even try to adapt them. And when a video game is made into a board game, usually it's not possible to do the same. So because it's complex, there are all these very, very complex decision trees, lots of elements, thousands of places to explore and speed, etc., etc. And also many computer games are either solo game, solo board game, it's starting, but I don't really believe in it, it's not really fun, or massively multiplayer. You cannot put 1,000 players around the table. It doesn't work. It has to be something, let's say, 2 to 10, 2 to 6. And the result is that when you try to make something, you have a successful video game, and you say, okay, let's make it a board game. In fact, it's not let's implement the video game as a board game. It's let's make a board game which captures something of the theme, the humor, the feel of the video game, but usually it's something completely different. And I have a good example here, which is Mechs and Minions, League of Legends board game. It's tactical, cooperative programmation for 2 to 4 players. And I'd say the only thing it has in common with the original, you can see, here is Mechs and Minions. It's a great game. It has fabulous components. I even can't imagine how they could produce it and sell it at the price they sold it. And make money, but maybe they even didn't. They didn't need it. But except for the names, the aesthetic that you can see here, the colors, the setting, but it's not League of Legends. It's something else. It's something completely different. And for the simple reason that it's mostly not possible to transfer that kind of video game into a board game. It's like it's just a setting. I make a game about League of Legends, like people say, I make a game about antiquity, I make a game about prehistoric times, etc., etc. But it's just the theme of the game. It's not the game itself. And when you try, I have a fun example here. 2 counter examples. Here here is the 7th continent. I don't know if some of you have played the card game, the 7th continent. It was a hit, it sold, I don't know how many copies, but a lot. And it's I think it's the one counterexample maybe of a card game which is designed like a video game. Trying, you know, all these explorations, this terribly complex tree of places, thousands of cards. It's probably slightly simpler in structure than a video game, but not that much. Here you have the tree of the different places in the seventh continent, but this means that you had to, it's a game with, you know, with thousands of cards. So some people seem to enjoy it, but actually, personally, I don't really see the point in printing thousands of cards and something which needs, I think, more than these 2 tables to play. It would be so much simpler on a computer to do this. So it's really trying very, very hard to make with cards something which is so easier to do with a computer. And it's also its charm, but you know, it's at the end I think it feels a bit contrived, a bit artificial. And I don't know if and when you try, I think it's the trap. When someone, I will go later to what I did with Wayne, when someone tries to adapt a computer game as a board game, there is one thing to avoid. The one thing to avoid is to stay too true to the original computer game. And I have an example here. I've not played it. I've not even seen it. It's a board game based on Crusader Kings, which is a video game I even never heard about. I don't know what it is, but some of you might know. And well, I've put this picture here because when I was preparing this talk, you know, I Googled a bit, you know, what has been written about video games into board games. And I stumbled on a review of this game, and I will read an excerpt of this review, which says, "You may have already guessed what I'm about to say. Crusader Kings has failed. The board game has potential, but rather than strike at the core of what makes the PC game interesting, it tries to cover a broad range of mechanisms that just don't translate well. The result is an underdeveloped mishmash of unfulfilling mechanisms in a game that lasts too long while leaving you feel like you barely accomplished anything." So it's not a very nice review, but I think it tells what's the problem. If you try to put everything of a video game in a board game, you just design something which doesn't really work, or which feels completely different than the original video games. That's where I will talk a bit of my experience. Where did I put my bag? I didn't, oh, maybe it's there. Okay, never mind. I've just worked on the adaptation of Reigns, the little phone app game, which is really fun, into a card game. When I was contacted by the makers of the video game, they had already been contacted by a few people who had ideas, who say, okay, you have made this, we like it, we want to do a card game based on it. And after all, it's also a game which looks like a card game in a way. There are cards on the phone. And they were not convinced because, and I think they were right, most of the people probably all of the people who had contacted them, just wanted to take the core system of Reigns with the arborescence of events and make it with cardboard, make it with cards. The problem is that if you try to do this, you end with a terribly complex game with lots of intricate decisions, which in fact, a real brain burning, while the actual game on the phone is just fun, fast and fun. And you cannot have this fast and fun with tons of cards and a complex arbored sense and looking where it goes, etc., etc. It's fun only because it's a phone who deals with this. And no, oh, this was something else. I forgot to talk about Age of Empires. Never, I will go later. So these are people playing my version of Reigns. And this is it. It will be published soon. This is a King's Dilemma, which is a game designed by a friend of mine, Lorenzo Silva. And in fact, he made what I didn't want to do with Reigns, what we didn't know, and what the Reigns designers didn't want to do. He made a very big, complex game using more or less the core system of Reigns with, okay, there are a few changes, but it's this idea of adapting this system into a card game. And the result is a big box with hundreds of cards. It's a campaign game where you have to play, I think, 12 or 15 games in a row, etc., etc. It absolutely doesn't feel like Reigns. So it's true to the mechanism. It's not true to the feel of the game, to the spirit. And I think the reason why the people who made Reigns contacted me and Hervé is because they wanted us to make something as light, as fun as the original, meaning true to the spirit, but not necessarily true to the mechanism, which is not, I think, really possible. It's not possible to be true to both. That's the problem. And that's why they contacted me and Hervé Maury, who has made Skur and a few zany games. And not, you know, people like Bruno Catara or Antoine Boza making serious games. So what we try to do is we just say, okay, what works? What is fun with this? What is fun is that, okay, there is a king making a decision and reacting to strange and a bit zany proposals. And say, okay, but we have to make this into a multiplayer game. And if we want to make it into a multiplayer game, it has to be a game about talking, and so the players will make these proposals. And we made something which has absolutely mechanically, there are some hints at the original games. You have the tracks here for the 4 aspects of the kingdom, you know, the church, the people, etc. You have, but the core of the game is that it's players who imagine the question. It's a storytelling game. Because, in fact, the video game is a storytelling game, but the story is told by your phone. And if we cannot have this, and story told by cards is not as fun, so story will be told by the players. It's also a way to make it really feel, just make it feel fun. And so that's, so we put small hints on the cards just to guide a bit the players. And from these hints, the players have to imagine what they are saying. And one of the players is the king. He puts his nice crown here on the head, and he speaks. And I think, in a way, it's more true to the original than what would have been done, could have been made with King's Dilemma. It's more true because it's true to the spirit. Because it was not possible to make exactly the same. A good example of an adaptation which is true to the spirit of a game, absolutely not to the mechanism, is this is the Angry Birds board game. And it works perfectly. It's a really fun game. But of course, you cannot do exactly the same. You cannot simulate what happens on the computer screen. You just make, and this is, I think, the best adaptation which could have been made. And this, they sold, I don't know, but I bet they sold 1 million copies because there have been tons of expansions with new pieces and plastic pieces. And this is, I think, the good way to adapt video games into board games. I think that's all I had. Just a small talk about hybrids, you know, trying to, from the beginning, make something which is half board game, half video games. I think it starts from, not always, it can work sometimes, but very often it doesn't really work. My few experiences, I designed one, which is Fears. It's completely forgotten. It didn't sell, even when I think it was fun. It could be played as a card game, but for the real experience, you needed a tablet. But the problem is that lots of people think that, okay, people like board games, it's becoming popular again, people like video games. What about making something hybrid? Well, you know, people like kebabs, people like vanilla ice cream. Why not make something hybrid? It won't work. It's not sure I'm not sure they will like it. So the problem is that it's not always a good idea to mix things. And most of the hybrids I've seen are very interesting core ideas. This World of Yo is very nice because it's a game. It was a game where your phone is your ship, and so there are infos on your phone, and you move your phone from space to space. And when two phones are near one to another, there can be a fight, etc., etc. I think the idea was cool. I don't think they sold much because, you know, it's complex. You have to put the things here and here. So there are a few fun things. There is a hybrid game I love, which I've played recently, which works. Which is Selfie Safari. I don't know if you've seen this. Selfie Safari, it's a game where you have cards with, you know, funny animals, pictures of funny animals in strange position, making strange faces. And each player draws a card secretly, takes phone, make a selfie, then you arrange the phone, you arrange the cards, and you have to guess who was trying to make what face. This is a wonderful hybrid game. Very simple, very easy, because it's something that you cannot make just with phone, just with cards. But I think it's an exception. Most times, most hybrids I've seen are really convoluted things. Maybe I've tried Chronicles of Crime, which has been, I don't like it. Chronicles of Crime, I think it feels like the board, the cards are superfluous. You don't need them. It could have worked as well, maybe even better, just with an app. I've been told it's better with Detective. I've not played it. Probably it is because the designer is a great guy and I think can make great things. But I don't feel the need for it. Well, I prefer, you know, this going back and forth and back and forth. And now, okay, just 2 minutes, I'm back to because I remember, okay. What I wanted to tell about Age of Empires. It's a good example of good implementation of a video game in the way that they didn't stick to the video game. When the board game was designed, the designer just decided to make a great board game, which is basically expansion and worker placement, more or less with the same theme and the same aesthetic. And it's a really great game. I've played it a lot. One of Grandover's best game. And the result, the game is so good that when they lost the license for Age of Empires, they just keep doing it with changing the name, and it works as well, because in fact it was just kind of a setting, and it can be changed a bit, and not that much, and it still works. Because in fact it's not the same game. So when you change a board game into a video game, most times it's the same game. When you change a video game into a board game, it has to be a different game. Okay, that's all I had to say. We still have 5, 6, 7 minutes. So any questions? Yeah.
Hello, thank you for the talk. You talk a lot about like if a game is fun or not, which is kind of subjective because different people like different kinds of games. So I was wondering, when you make a game, how do you determine the level of complexity that your players would enjoy? For example, like to list 3 strategy games like Scythe, Azul and chess, they're all strategy games, but they have different levels of complexity and they don't necessarily target the same players. So how do you, when you make a game, determine that?
It's very simple. I design the games people around me like and are ready to play test with me. So I know the friends with whom I usually play test. I know some of them are also game designers. Some are video game designers. And I know what they like. I know what I like. I try to design the game I like and they will like. And that's my test. And this doesn't, you know, I like playing size, for example. I will never design a game like this. Not, well, in part because, you know, I'm getting old and lazy and it's certainly far too much work, but also because I have absolutely no idea with whom I could playtest this until it worked well, because it means hundreds of games.
Another question. I'm Damien Botte. What do you think about the new devices, especially mixing board game and video game, included physical object?
You think tableau and that kind of things? Yeah, well, I'm not sure it's really interesting because, you know, I think it's important when you play board games. It's important to have table with beer and whiskey and everything, and you can smoke and you can drink and you can talk. And, you know, I hardly can imagine doing this, you know, on these big tables. It feels like, you know, you have to really organize something, make the game very formal. Make, okay, now we are around this, you know, big thing, which, of course, it's very expensive. And we have making this. So it's, I'm wary of this. I'm more interested, you know, in these light things. Actually, I've bought, you know, this kind of big die that you is supposed to play a few games. I've not played it yet, but which is kind of very big die which makes strange noises and is supposed to make strange actions depending on which side it runs. This maybe, but you know, this big table simulating board games, you know, I don't think when you play board games, you really need to have very, very realistic graphics and all that stuff. You know, you play Catan, it's no graphics, nothing. And my prototypes have no graphics at all, usually. Everything happens in the head of the players, and it's enough. So why make things too realistic? We don't need it. I think if a game needs this, it means it's a bad game. No other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious about what you said about play testing your games with the same groups of people and that kind of directing the kind of games that you make. I'm just curious to know, I mean, do you find that that's something that's limiting, or is that something that doesn't worry you, that you know, that the set of feedback that you're getting is from sort of the same set of people and they might not necessarily be representative? Is that something that you worry about?
A bit, but you know, they are certainly not representative, but they are probably representatives of people who buy my games. And it's also the people with whom I have fun playing. You know, it usually happens at my flat. I cook. I like to cook a lot. I cook a big dinner. And so we eat, and then we drink, and then we play, and a game. And if it doesn't work, we play something else. It's something very casual. And I really can't imagine going. I've seen a few designers, you know, go into convention and make, you know, this kind of blind test where they don't take part in the game. I've never done this. And even sometimes, you know, give, you know, some papers with, you know, you have to check what you like, what you didn't like, etc. I cannot imagine doing this. I think for me, the informal aspect is very important. It might be one of the reasons, by the way, why why theoretically I have absolutely nothing against digital games and I don't play them that much. It might be because they have this very, very formal aspect, which is not that strong with card game and board games, which are already more formal than the real world, but less than video games, I think.
Is it okay for me to ask a follow-up question? This is really interesting. So when, and the group of people that you tend to playtest with, are they, do they tend to be quite vocal about their thoughts on it? Do you have big conversations with them, like after you've playtested or during? Or is it more kind of, you're sort of, picking up on subtle things as you're playing and...
It depends. It depends. Sometimes, we just start and, okay, it doesn't work, let's put it away and start something else. When I see that players are not having fun, when I see that, okay, after 10 minutes we already know who will win, I say, okay, let's play something else. And I have tons of games, we can always play something else. There are other board game designers here. Usually they also brought some prototypes, so we can always play something else. But I think, yes, it's important to have feedback. It can be during the game. If the game works well, okay, we just play, and after the game I ask, okay, what do you think could help make it better? Sometimes I just think in my head, before going to sleep, and I have an idea. But there's no real rule. There's no real system, I think, at least for me.
Thanks very much.
It's not that I'm interested in computer games. It's, yeah.
Repeat your question.
What would make you interested in playing video games? Like, are there changes in the technology, like virtual reality, AR, and developments in the social communication aspect?
I was very excited about VR at the beginning, and after trying once or twice, it felt for me always like being on a computer. Always this aspect that, okay, I'm still feeling that I am with a machine, and which is what I wanted to escape a bit with it. So I think, I think I would, and that's what I said about this selfie safari, this stupid selfie game. I'm very open to playing with, I'm more open to playing with phones than with big computers or big table, big machines, because it has this light aspect. You can move with it, you can make something else. It feels a bit like playing with, just a pen when you are in a drawing game or something like this. I don't like when it looks like the machine is the center of the things. So I think I would play more easily with a computer if there is something that makes me forget that I am playing with a computer. And so far it's starting to happen with phones, not yet with computers, I think.
I guess we're done with the questions. Thank you so much. Shall I welcome to the stage? Yes, let's give another applause to Bruno. Our next speaker, I'm not going to ask her how she's going to pronounce her surname. Hi, Jennifer. Such a